late than never, but I just finished recently the season 2 of The Mandalorian. I'm here today to give my thoughts on what I thought of the season and how I feel about the show going forward and with the other shows that have been announced in the recent months. Some of you guys have noticed this if you've been following my social media outlets. I haven't really had the energy to talk about anything Star Wars related in the last several months. Truth be told, it was a lot of it because of the fan backlash that came out of the Rise of Skywalker release and the video that I did on how Star Wars fans ruined the franchise for me. If any one of you who have seen that video for the first time and you're just subscribing to my channel, well, I just want to say that I'm not really a fan of that video anymore. While I still hold many, if not all, of the opinions that I expressed in that video, I feel like I probably shouldn't have resorted to fighting fire with fire so much the way I did. And going forward, I can't promise that I'm always going to get this right, but I'm going to try to be as level-headed and calm as I possibly can when I talk about Star Wars. Considering all of the noise that comes out of the fandom these days, I would like to try to be a calming voice of reason in the midst of this hornet's nest that seems to have taken over the Star Wars fandom in the last several years. But I'm not going to be surprised if either way I get some backlash no matter what. And also in my Rise of Skywalker review last year, or the year before, I mean we are in the new year, I did kind of do the same thing in that one, and I don't really think that was a smart move. That being said, I'm not going to take the videos down because I think it's important for any new subscribers who have joined me. It's important for you to see those past videos and other videos that I've done before, so that way you can see where I'm at right now and how much I've hopefully progressed in the last few years. And I also think it's important for me to look back on that with the newfound perspective that I have now, in order to use that as a learning curve for me. I think everybody should do that. If you're expecting growth and perfection at the same time, well, good luck with that, because they can't coexist. In order to learn, you gotta fumble a little bit along the way. And I'll address this more later on, but if you're expecting me to use this review of the season 2 of The Mandalorian to slag off the Star Wars sequel trilogy, well, you might want to go somewhere else, because you're on the wrong video if you're hoping for that, because I'm not going to do that here. So let's get into season 2 of The Mandalorian. I'm not going to talk about everything because there's so much detail to cover, but I'll talk about certain things and give you my general thoughts on how I feel about the season and how I feel about the show going forward, and maybe go into some detail about how I feel about the shows coming up, the other streaming series. I don't know how you say that correctly. And also the concerns of the fan service that some people have complained about with this season. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I'll try to be as calm and respectful as I can. Anywho, let's get on to season 2 of The Mandalorian with spoilers in case you haven't seen it. So if you saw my last video on The Mandalorian, you know that I really like the show. I thought season 1 was a really good start to the series. It was a breath of fresh air, and it was good to see that Star Wars was going in a different direction as opposed to the movies, which I'm not against saga films or movie trilogies, if you will, but to see Star Wars for the first time in live action on a TV screen, like a television show, that really hadn't been done before until now, and Star Trek had done that once before with The Next Generation. This was really refreshing to see this, where it was a lot more simplistic and contained, while also feeling a bit grand and big at the same time. I thought the Mandalorian was a fascinating character, along with his friendship with Baby Yoda, who I knew instantly the moment he showed up was going to be a big internet sensation. And here we are, over a year later, and he's already taken that rightful place. It was a little bit shaky with certain episodes, but every show when it starts out is going to experience that. Now that they've laid the groundwork and they've built the foundation, season 2 is where I figured that they were going to have some fun with it, with some connective tissue and some characters that were going to show up in here, like Ahsoka Tano, or Boba Fett, or Luke Skywalker, as we'll talk about later. The whole premise of the season is Mando trying to get Baby Yoda, or Grogu, as he's later revealed to be named, to a Jedi, in order for him to be trained properly as a Force user. It's a very simple plot, no added emotional depth. It's very simplistic. There's nothing wrong with having emotional complexity, but it's kind of refreshing to see Star Wars take on a simplistic approach. So throughout the season, the Mandalorian faces several obstacles and scenarios that are facing his way, like Cobb Vanth, who's played by Timothy Olyphant, who had stumbled across the Boba Fett's armor. He's been instructed to take the Mandalorian armor back to other Mandalorians that are out there, but in order to do that, he has to help Vanth and the local townspeople, along with the Tusken Raiders, take on this Krayt Dragon that's picking off people one by one. In other scenarios, like helping this frog lady get her and her eggs to this one moon called Trask. He has to help her get to this moon in order to find other Mandalorians like bo-katan, who we later see is played by Katie Sackhoff, and with her help, he manages to find another Jedi named Ahsoka Tano. It's to see if she can train Grogu. And then other scenarios like trying to get a signal out to Moff Gideon's ship when Grogu's later kidnapped by the Empire, and also with the help of Boba Fett and Mayfeld from the previous season, who actually turned out to be a former Imperial soldier. The episodes follow a very similar arc. There's a certain obstacle that the Mando has to get through, certain things happen, and he manages to get out of it somehow, just sometimes by the skin of his teeth. It's a formula that I'm starting to notice that the show is picking up on. All things follow a formula, whether you like it or not. Now, we'll see if other seasons for The Mandalorian follow suit. I think this season is probably much better than the first season. And this is also overseen by Jon Favreau, who has said publicly that he's a Star Wars fan, and he brought back numerous other people to direct each episode. And I think he wrote most of the episodes along with Dave Filoni and Rick Famuyiwa. Hopefully I said that right. And various people helm certain episodes. I'm just gonna say it right up front. The best episode for me so far of the entire show is The Jedi, where we meet Ahsoka Tano, played by Rosario Dawson. Ahsoka Tano is taking on this Imperial magistrate, Morgan Elsbeth, and her Lieutenant Lang, played by Michael Biehn, who you might know as Kyle Reese from Terminator. The Mandalorian finds Ahsoka, and through her conversations with Grogu, we also get to learn a bit of his backstory, that he was raised in the Jedi Temple at Coruscant, and when the Republic fell, he was evacuated from the Jedi Temple and has been hiding ever since, suppressing his powers in order to survive. Unfortunately for Mando, Ahsoka refuses to train Grogu, considering what she's seen in various Jedi, in particular one Jedi who used to be her master, Anakin Skywalker. In fact, when she said that, I knew instantly who she was talking about. I haven't watched the Clone War TV series, admittedly, but the way the backstory was told in that episode, it was so beautifully done, and it was so riveting. Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka was incredible as the character. She is probably by far my favorite guest character in this show, in this season at least. Although Boba Fett might be some competition. Maybe. So she and Mando take on the Imperial Magistrate and her lieutenant, and they set the townspeople free of the town that they're controlling. And we learn that the Magistrate's master is Grand Admiral Thrawn, who you might remember from the Expanded Universe lore. Ahsoka, being reluctant to train Grogu, sends the Mando out to this planet called Tython, where there's remnants of an ancient Jedi temple, where Grogu can send out a message to any Force user out there in the galaxy, and then maybe somebody will come along and train him in the ways of the Force. Not just because of Rosario Dawson, the imagery, the cinematography, the action, everything about this episode was just perfect for me. It reminded me of The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, and also a little bit of a Western flair to it, like Magnificent Seven. The imagery in here, particularly with Ahsoka Tano in the forest with the moon right behind her, it is just beautiful imagery, and some of the best imagery that I've seen in the Star Wars franchise by far. And also,
Grogu.
The cuteness from Grogu, it's just too much, man. And Ahsoka's intro in that episode with her whipping out the lightsabers and taking on those goons, that was epic. That was epic as hell. I just realized I'm about to jump around here, but since I mentioned the imagery, going back to the first episode of the season where they take on the Krayt Dragon, apparently this episode, to my knowledge, was directed by Jon Favreau with IMAX cameras, and considering the sense of scale that you feel with the Krayt Dragon as it comes out of the cave to take on the people, the size of this thing, none of it looked fake on my end. It looked just about flawless. And also, the little details that we see of the Sand People riding in single file, just like Obi-Wan said in A New Hope, so perfect. And I also like how we got a little bit of time with the Tusken Raiders, or the Sand People as they're also called. They're not necessarily the monsters that they're made out to be, even though they're not exactly the most welcoming types of people or creatures on the planet Tatooine. And the sound effects for the Tusken Raiders, it's practically iconic from the original film and in the prequel trilogy. As for other fan favorite characters that show up, bo-katan, played by Katie Sackhoff, who I believe was the voice of the same character in the Clone Wars TV show, shows up in here when the Mandalorian's looking for other Mandalorian warriors to help him find a Jedi Knight that could train Baby Yoda or Grogu. I don't care which name I use. If I end up using either one, for me that's enough. You could argue that this episode was a little bit too fan servicey, and maybe it was to some degree, but I think it was fan service done right. Katie Sackhoff as bo-katan was quite good in the role, and I really like seeing how they had a conflicting ideology of sorts. This is a different type of Mandalorian cult than what Mando was used to. He's very, very diehard and very rigid in his beliefs. You don't take off your mask. oh, he's one of them. Kind of reminds me of different sects of Christianity or Judaism or Islam, different denominations of major religions. They follow their ideology in their own way that they see fit. And that episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, who did, I believe, one episode the previous season where they go onto that planet taking on the AT-ST Walker. And as far as her handling the episode, like the action where they get onto the Imperial ship, you could definitely tell that Bryce Dallas Howard is Ron Howard's daughter because it's in the genetics, man. I'm just saying. She did really great. And since it was also directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, the atmospheric re-entry was apparently an homage to Apollo 13, which was also made by Ron Howard. Then we have the episode The Siege, directed by Carl Weathers. Apollo Creed himself directed an episode of Star Wars. Can we get Sylvester Stallone in here too? Well, probably not because he's too expensive. But still, that would be really cool if he both showed up in there and did the same scene together. Can you imagine that? It's similar to Michael Biehn being in here. I was half expecting Linda Hamilton to show up, and even Edward Furlong. It would be like the reunion of Terminator that we all want to see. Well, he died in this season, so you can't have that. But still, that would have been cool though. But the premise of The Siege is that they have to blow up this Imperial base that's nearby on their planet. Then you also learn that Moff Gideon is still alive. Well, the Mandalorian learns it at least, because we saw the season finale in season 1 where he survived the TIE fighter crash with the Darksaber. I'm not too familiar with the Darksaber. Again, I haven't watched the Clone Wars, but if you guys could let me know what that's all about, let me know. But the action scene where they're being chased by the TIE fighters in the canyon, that was really, really awesome. Carl Weathers did a phenomenal job helming that sequence. Almost reminded me of the Millennium Falcon chase in Force Awakens, where Finn is in the gun turret of the Falcon trying to take on the TIE fighters. I'm just saying it took me right back to that sequence. As far as worst episodes go, I'd have to say the passenger episode isn't really the most memorable. It just kind of feels like filler. I don't really dislike the episode much because at least for the most part it is entertaining, and Mando and Grogu are trying to avoid these snow ice cave spiders, which... why does it have to be spiders? Why? Since I mentioned my favorite episode, a favorite moment of mine, besides the Boba Fett action sequence, which we'll get to later, they released Mayfeld from prison, who's played by Bill Burr, who we saw in the previous season. They need his help to break into this Imperial base in order to send a signal to Moff Gideon's ship so they could figure out where Baby Yoda is. The best scene in this episode for me, and probably season 2, is where the Mandalorian has to take off his helmet that he's stolen from an Imperial pilot, uses his face to get scanned in order to send the signal to Moff Gideon's ship, but then gets cornered by an Imperial officer, Valen Hess, played by Richard Brake, who turns out to be Mayfeld's former superior. And the conversation that ensues is that Mayfeld turns out to really, really hate this guy because of a massacre that occurred with his fellow soldiers, and his officer doesn't really seem to care. Comes off as very battle-hardened and very gun-ho military-like, kind of like George C. Scott as General Patton in the movie Patton. And just like with Finn in the sequel trilogy, it does a great job of humanizing the stormtroopers or Imperial personnel. In fact, Richard Brake, who plays the Imperial officer, as I was watching that moment and seeing him talk, I thought, where have I seen that guy before? He looks familiar. And I looked up the episode and I went, holy crap. That's Joe Chill from Batman Begins. Mayfeld kills his superior, they blow up the Imperial base, and he gets to walk scot-free. Nobody even knows he's alive. But also, since I mentioned that they have to save Baby Yoda, this is the shortest episode, directed by Robert Rodriguez, that ended on a cliffhanger, which made me furious. In a good way, not in a bad way. And we get to see, finally, Boba Fett in action, kicking stormtroopers' asses. He showed up in a brief cameo in the first episode of this season. Tamara Morrison returns to play this character. He played Jango Fett in the prequels, he voiced Boba Fett in the special editions of the original trilogy, and here he is in The Mandalorian. And we all know this, but Boba Fett, as far as original trilogy characters, didn't really do anything. Just walked around, talked to Darth Vader, got to fly around, fire a couple shots, and then he got thrown into a Sarlacc pit. I know there's been various books and comics that have been written about Boba Fett, but as far as on-screen portrayals of Boba Fett, I didn't really care that much about him. He looked cool, he had a nice design, and that was about it. But then you get to see him in and out of his armor taking on stormtroopers. And then he finally puts his armor on and does some actual really cool stuff. Stuff that we've heard about and that we imagined of, but we never got to see until now. Now I finally understand why people like Boba Fett so much. That was the most that he's ever done than any of the other movies by far. But then in the final episode, The Rescue, with the help of Cara Dune and bo-katan and her fellow Mandalorians, they managed to sneak onto Moff Gideon's ship and save Baby Yoda while also taking on the Dark Troopers, who are basically this universe's version of Terminators. These things are freaking terrifying, and when one of them is punching the Mandalorian's helmet in, that gave me goosebumps, and I actually got scared that he was actually going to die in that scene. And then finally, they save Baby Yoda, they kidnap Moff Gideon and capture him on the bridge. But then it turns out, in order to get rid of the Darksaber, Mando and bo-katan have to face each other in a fight to the Deathlight challenge. But just when it turns out that the Dark Troopers are coming back ready to kill them, an X-Wing shows up. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. New Republic's here. Okay. And the cloaked figure comes out of the X-Wing. And as I watched that unfold, I was going, huh? Wait. Wait a minute. Wait a minute! The whole point of the season was to get Grogu, Baby Yoda, to a Jedi. And for a while I was wondering, is it Ahsoka Tano, who later turns out to say, I can't deal with it, you need somebody else to do it. Some people speculated that Mace Windu might show up, or Cal Kestis from Jedi Fallen Order. I kind of said offhand, what if they bring back Luke Skywalker in here, played by Sebastian Stan, or if they use a DH Mark Hamill to show up. But then I thought, no, they wouldn't bring back Luke in this show. Would they? Could they? They could, but I don't know. Considering where we are in the timeline of events, this is in between original and sequel trilogies. The stuff with Kylo Ren and the First Order hasn't happened yet, and Luke is rebuilding the Jedi Order, or at least is starting to rebuild the Jedi Temple or Jedi Order in a way. So Grogu being one of his students initially, that made sense to me. As soon as that green lightsaber turned on, I said out loud, oh my god, it's Skywalker! And we see him mowing the Dark Troopers down the hallway, similar to the final scene in Rogue One where Darth Vader takes on the rebel soldiers. It does a great job of showing you that this guy definitely is the son of Anakin Skywalker. But then you see him without his hood on, and you get to see his full face. Some people actually thought that was good, some people thought it was horrible. Some shots, I thought it looked fine. Other times, not so much. That being said though, I liked the idea or the essence that Luke is there, and that he's here rounding up Jedi Force users, and that he's here to train Grogu in the ways of the Force. So the episode ends with the Mandalorian handing Grogu over to Luke, but then he takes off his helmet and lets Grogu touch his face to say goodbye. And I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. And so Grogu leaves with Luke. Everybody looks on a little bit sad and a little bit happy that Grogu's finally found a place to go to. But Pedro Pascal as Mando, I'm not too familiar with his work outside of this show and Wonder Woman 84, but he did fantastic. And I think that he does a great job as the character throughout this whole show. Especially since for the most part, he's wearing a helmet. He's got to convey all this emotion from just behind a mask, just like Darth Vader in the originals and with Kylo Ren in the sequel trilogy. All down to the cinematography, the direction, the writing, and the musical score, which by the way, Ludwig Göransson, hopefully I said that right, this music in this series is fantastic. That main theme that plays during the credits, it's so different from what John Williams did, but yet in some ways it sounds exactly like his, particularly the da 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 pays tribute to what came before while still doing its own thing. Also, when R2-D2 comes around from behind Luke, I squealed with joy. R2 is my favorite droid in Star Wars. Yeah, come at me. And don't get me wrong, I like BB-8, but R2, man, he's the bomb. He is the bomb. Then we get a post-credit scene or mid-credit scene with Fennec and Boba Fett showing up at Jabba's palace with an overweight Bib Fortuna who was the advisor to Jabba the Hutt. Boba Fett kills him, and then he and Fennec take over the throne. And I'm assuming that's setting up the show for Boba Fett, which there's been talk for years about a Boba Fett spin-off movie. I think Boba Fett's more suited for the streaming side of the universe. Just like Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Lando, or Ahsoka Tano, or Admiral Thrawn, or these Rangers of the New Republic that we're gonna see. Since we mentioned that, there's a lot of new content from streaming that is coming out for Star Wars, and of course, more movies. Like, some people are not really pleased about that. They feel like it's just too much. And also with the fan service, like with Luke, Ahsoka, and Boba Fett being in the show, I understand why people are concerned about that, and they feel that the show is gonna rely too much on fan service, which they complained about with the sequel trilogy, and even the prequel trilogy Once Upon a Time. But I think for this season, for me anyway, I think they found the right balance of having the stuff that they could throw in there for the fans while still making the characters of Mando and Grogu and everybody else engaging. They found, I think, the right combination to make this all worth watching. And I don't mind fan service as long as there's a good story in there. Just like with The Force Awakens, I didn't mind that there was a big space station. I didn't mind that there was a droid with important information. I didn't mind there was a desert planet with Rey, and a Dark Force user with a mask on. Similar with this one. I didn't mind seeing Luke, or Boba Fett, or Ahsoka Tano. And if you're one of those people who feels that not everything has to be connected and you want originality every single time a new Star Wars property comes out, I understand why you would feel that way. And I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but not everything has to be connected, sure, but not everything has to be disconnected. This is Star Wars we're talking about. There's going to be connective tissue in here, whether you like it or not. If you really think that Boba Fett shouldn't be in here, or Ahsoka, or Luke, or whoever, then by that logic, we shouldn't even mention the Force, we shouldn't have lightsabers, and we shouldn't even mention the Empire or the Stormtroopers, or heck, maybe the Tusken Raiders shouldn't even show up. By that logic, none of that stuff should be in here. And at that point, it doesn't even feel like Star Wars anymore. I think there's a big danger of going to the extreme in either direction. I'm the kind of guy who prefers like a healthy balance of both. As long as they get it right in execution, I'm not gonna have a problem with it. And I feel like they did a great job of doing that in this season. And also, to those people who say that this is the true sequel to the original trilogy, and they're praising the show to slag off the sequel trilogy, look, I don't want to get too deep into this. I already stirred up a hornet's nest once before, but if you prefer The Mandalorian over the sequel trilogy, that's fine. I got no problem with that at all. If you're wondering which I like better, the sequel trilogy or The Mandalorian, I don't like to compare. I don't like comparing the two of them, and also, I don't really think it's fair to do that, because one of them's a movie trilogy, the other's a television show that hasn't fully finished its run yet. There's still more seasons to come, but they have their own set of goals. One was meant to be a conclusion to the Skywalker saga, connecting the original characters with newer characters that we can get into for this current generation. This show is meant to be a small side story with a different character that's not really connected to any of the other Skywalkers or whatever, along with some connective tissue thrown in there, like the characters that we mentioned before and mentions of the Jedi and the Empire. Different pieces of media with their own set of goals. And you can make arguments for either side on the sequel trilogy whether or not they did a good job of achieving its goal. Me personally, I think they did the best job that they could. I'll save that for future videos, but bottom line, I don't really think it's fair to compare the two. And to say that Mandalorian is the true sequel to the originals, this isn't meant to be a sequel to the original trilogy anyway. So, yeah, I don't really think it's fair to do that. And for anyone who's continuing to praise The Mandalorian by slagging off the sequel trilogy, please stop doing that, okay? Just please don't. But I guarantee you that I'm gonna get a bunch of crap thrown my way anyway. I'm trying to be as respectful as I can, but if I end up stirring another hornet's nest again, well, alright, so be it. But all I could say is with future Star Wars content, I'm always happy to watch more Star Wars stuff, whether it's shows or movies. I've been a fan since I was 6 years old, and I'm not giving up on it. I'm always going to give a new Star Wars project the benefit of the doubt, as we all should. So those are my thoughts on Mandalorian Season 2 and the current temperature in the room on certain things that showed up in the season. Thank you guys for watching this video. What are your thoughts on Mandalorian Season 2, and how do you feel about the show going forward? Do you love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, comment below and tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you all very soon.